What's up, guys? Another episode of the IRR Zero podcast, and today we have with us the natural Chris Bumstead. How are you, mate?
I'm fantastic, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Really enjoying this podcast. I like the episodes with AJ and Tim and Finn stuff. Really enjoyable. So thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for accepting the invitation. And today's episode will be very helpful to all the competitors this year, or the guys that are thinking about competing, because we will touch many, of course you as the expert, we will talk about many different points of the posing and how important it truly is. I want to start off by your current competition level and how are the things looking, because I saw the post literally 3 minutes ago of your current check form, and it looks crazy. What are the plans for this year, and how has the transition from Finn to Tim has been going for you?
So a little bit of sort of background information on myself and sort of competitive history. I competed for the first time in 2022. So that was as a junior, and then I also did classic physique. So that was the first time that the UKDFBA and the sort of natural federations had actually brought out classic physique. So I remember saying to Finn, what would you think about maybe just doing classic, just to see, it's more stage time. It was my first time competing. I didn't really set any sort of expectations in terms of results and outcomes. It was more so just to get experience, see if I actually like competing. And I said to him, what about doing classic, an extra division, a bit more stage time? And he was like, yeah, you know what, we can go for it. So I did my first show and I got first in juniors, which I was absolutely buzzing about. I didn't think I would do well. I remember seeing the guys I was up against and they were absolutely massive. And when you're backstage and you're looking at people and you're like, oh my goodness. I remember this one guy I competed against, Alex. He had those Kai Green lower lats and
yeah.
And I remember saying that and thinking, oh my goodness. So I won juniors, and then I did classic physique and I got second in classic. And the feedback was from Christian, the head judge, who's now the president of the UKDFBA. He was like, you are classic, okay? That is your federation, okay? Whatever you do, just go down that route. So that was really beneficial. Like I said, I just wanted to get, a bit more stage time, see if I actually enjoyed competing, because I knew I loved bodybuilding. I loved the training aspect. It's just whether I enjoyed the actual competitive side and getting on stage. And then went away, built on what we had done in 2022 into an off season, and came back in 2024 as a junior in most federations. I think I was 23 years old. So the way some juniors work is 23 and under, or just under 23. So there was a couple of federations where I could still be a junior. So I actually did my first show as an untested show in 2024. So that was a Two Bros regional show it was actually in Ireland. So it was the first time they'd ever done that. And it was in the same venue that I used to do a lot of my school plays. It was in my hometown. And I was like, I'm definitely doing that show because all my friends, all my family could come watch me. So I did that show and I came second in junior classic physique to Liam Watson. I'm not sure if you've heard of Liam Watson.
Yeah. I remember the prep when Finn was discussing it and the results. I remember watching the Finn's YouTube video from that stage presence.
So I came second to Liam, and Liam's obviously an IFBB pro now, so I couldn't be too annoyed about that one. And then I went into the men's open category, so my height category, and I actually won that. So I beat, I think it was 3 or 4 guys in that. And it just shows both the posing side of things, but also just your shape and your genetic structure can take you far. I beat guys with maybe 30 pounds of muscle on me. I think it was 40 pounds under my weight cap. But when you have that classic shape and structure, it will always sort of shine through. So I was absolutely over the moon about that. That was really good. And then we went into my first sort of planned show of the year, and that was NBFI Ireland. So did junior bodybuilding, got first in that, did classic physique, got first in that, and then won the overall as well. So I would say that's probably the highlight of my competitive career, because everyone always dreams of winning overalls, but you never actually really think it's going to happen. And even when it happened, I was so shocked I couldn't really be present and enjoy it, because I was just like, what is going on? So yeah, that was the highlight of my career. Absolutely loved that day. And then we went into the UKDFBA British Championships, That was just in the men's open, like classic physique. There was no junior classic physique, and I got fifth in that one. And by that point, like my physique had just started getting a little bit tired. Like it was a long enough prep. I think there's definitely things I could have managed a little bit better in terms of like a communication and training standpoint. So my back, I think Tim's maybe said, or Finn
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
said,
We talked about this.
um, yeah, like my back and my posterior is a little bit weaker, or a lot weaker compared to my front. And just, those back sessions were dragging, and like I was struggling with them, and I probably didn't realize and communicate it well enough to preserve the muscle mass there. So wasn't overly happy with that. Was very disappointed actually, but I learned a lot from that show, and I lost to four guys who are all fantastic. It was almost like a bit of a European show. We had Ron from Israel coming over. There was Felix from Germany as well. So it was a little bit of like a European show. It wasn't just British, but I was, I like I said, I learned a lot from that show, and then qualified for the European Championships out in Denmark, and it was a weird one. It was like I knew it wasn't my best, but I was like, I need to do this. I don't know when I'm going to get to compete in a European Championship again. So went out there, and that was back-to-back peak weeks, so it was a little bit stressful coming back from England to Ireland, getting everything ready, then flying out to Denmark. Had to actually fly to England and then go to Denmark as well, so there was a lot of travel involved. But did junior classic physique and then also men's, so I won the juniors and then came second in the men's and lost to Zachariah, Cal Pro Coach's
Oh,
new
yeah.
client. Seen him, absolutely ridiculous. He's now enhanced, and just looks insane. He'll definitely be at the Olympia someday. So it's pretty cool to say that I competed against him. So yeah, finished the season off as European champion, Irish overall champion. So very, very successful. And then the goal since then has just been build up the posterior, come back again 2026, and probably try go win my pro card. So that is the plan. And in so the majority of that last off season there, or this off season, was with Finn, and then November time I decided to make the jump and switch over to Tim, and I know you've touched on that in the podcast, but with both guys, but for those of you who don't know, it's really just simply to focus more or to separate my own bodybuilding and my business side of things. It was just getting to the stage where Finn and I were just so close. We were like best mates, business partners. I was seeing him so much, and you kind of lose that little bit of like hierarchy with your coach. So I often think, like the most successful coach athlete relationships, they're often the ones where you like put your coach up here, but when you're on the same level in so many other aspects, it becomes difficult to keep that coach sort of up in this position. And I know Tim well. I get on well with him. I've helped with posing for his clients as well. So I decided it was probably the right decision, and it was a very difficult decision, but so far things are going very, very well. So yeah, just currently I'm not going to say I'm still reversing out, because like it's 10 weeks into this little mini off season, but 10 weeks after my pre-prep diet now, still keeping things fairly tight in terms of like a body composition standpoint. And yeah, I don't think prep's not beginning for another 15 weeks or so. It's going to be the beginning of May. I'm going to be targeting sort of like the later shows in the year. So I don't think I will announce the shows that I'm going to do. I maybe will at some point, but I'll be doing a couple of shows in Ireland, a couple of shows in England, different federations as well. I don't really want to sort of like pigeonhole myself just into like WMBF, UKDFBA. I enjoy competing. I want to do all the federations if I can. So that was the plan. And like I said, to hopefully win my pro card.
I was going to ask about the federation, but if you don't want to announce the big shows, I don't want to put you in that position. But also when it comes to the transition, I feel like since Tim and Finn know each other, and I think they talk about they know each other for like 9 years or so, the transition must have been like perfect for you, because both guys, they know each other. So it's not like you're going to a completely different coach, and it's still the same environment. And I feel like it takes some maturity to understand that maybe the coach-client relationship, when it gets like too friendly, it can actually hinder the results. And that way you can still get in touch. You can still like contact each other, be in business, be friends. And have the coaching aspects with another person who's also like cool and they know each other. So that's perfect. I wanted to touch on one more point. It's funny how you said that when you started competing at 22, the UKFDBA just announced the classic physique, and when Chris Bumstead was starting his competition, the NPC just announced classic physique. So there's a resemblance there as well, because I know there were some reels for the comparison for the natural Chris Bumstead because of the lat spread and the structure. So there's also resemblance in that aspect that you both
It's when I grew the mustache a wee bit better as well. Then I often look like C-Bum a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think classic physique had maybe been around for, it was maybe a year or two. So I think it might have been like 3 or 4 years actually. But Chris Bumstead obviously didn't do the first year, and then I think the first Olympia he had won, it was maybe a year or two before the UKDFBA brought out classic. And I know there was like a lot of federations were kind of a bit hesitant to bring out classic physique just because, you know, obviously given the size difference, like with open bodybuilding and, you know, as in the enhanced sort of bodybuilding side of things, you know, you can tell who's classic and who's bodybuilding. It's that discrepancy is a lot more clear. But with natural bodybuilding, you know, we're all kind of a very similar weight. We're all a similar size. So there was always people kind of saying, you know, oh, you don't need classic bodybuilding. Natural bodybuilding is classic physique. But then I just kind of show them my check-in pictures and say, well, you know, look at my waist, look at my structure. Like if I do open, yes, I can still do well, but I'm definitely more suited to that classic physique route. So
I think in Europe it's even more confusing because back in the IFBB times, we had both classic physique and classic bodybuilding. And classic bodybuilding is just like weight restricted bodybuilding with all the mandatory poses, and classic physique has different poses. I think in the IFBB they still have like a vacuum pose as a mandatory. That's also funny, like how the different federations have different rules for it. But I think when people say that it's the same as bodybuilding with a weight restriction, I couldn't disagree more, because it's like, just like you said, when you look at the physique, you can easily tell like if someone is classic or not, and just tilting your hips isn't making you classic. If you can't stand there in front relaxed and look classic, I don't think you are. And this is just like you can tell it clearly. And when it comes to like different federation criteria, which federation do you think is like the most, obviously outside of the NPC, the most classic? Because I'm not sure what the rules in the WMBF are. Like what is the main federation you would be taking your part in?
So, like I said, I don't really want to just narrow myself into one federation when I compete, but in terms of like the experience that I've had so far, I would say the UKDFBA with Christian. He's also, so MBFI Ireland and UKDFBA, they're kind of the same federation, but just one's UK, one's Ireland. So a lot of the UKDFBA judges and also backstage staff will come over and help out with MBFI. I would say they're very clued in as to what classic physique is and what it represents. Christian himself has a very good eye as a judge. He knows the criteria, and he has his own version of classic physique, which I think is very accurate to very similar to what I would view classic physique as. So I would say the UKDFBA are very good at judging classic physique. It's very rare that you look at the results within classic at the UKDFBA and think, I'm not too sure about that. It's a lot more clear. The WMBF, so that's obviously very new for the WMBF classic physique. They do things a little bit differently. Like they change their posing quite a bit to almost give a little bit of a difference between bodybuilding and classic. So they have the 4 symmetry poses, so like your quarter turns, and then they will specify an asymmetrical front double bicep. So essentially that is just making sure you do a front double bicep, but your feet are, you're in that like classic stance, okay? Then they go straight into a classic side chest. So you've got, you know, it's not a normal side chest, it's when like the back of the hands are kind of touching. Personally for me, I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think anyone looks better doing that classic side chest compared to a normal side chest. And then they go for a back double bicep, but you have to open one hand up. Then they have the abs and thigh with a vacuum. They also have a classic side tricep pose, and then your favorite classic pose. So there is quite a bit of a difference between federations in terms of the poses that you do. And I always say to clients, you know, like make sure that you research the federation in terms of like what the posing criteria is, because I've seen guys turn up for the WMBF and they haven't had a clue what poses they're going to be doing. They thought it was going to be the same as bodybuilding, and judges have said classic side chest, and they're hitting a normal one, and the judges are still shouting at them, say classic side chest, and they just don't have an idea. So yeah, I'm not like a massive fan of the WMBF classic posing criteria. I think, I always say it's a classic physique division. It's not a classic posing division. The physique should always be the thing that separates you, not the posing. And I think they're almost trying to make almost like too much of a difference in terms of like bodybuilding and classic. So they're changing the posing too much. But at the end of the day, you're just making some of the physiques look a little bit worse, in my opinion. But that's the way they want to run things. You have to respect that. And yeah, potentially might be doing WMBF this year. So I'll be doing my classic side chest and my classic side tricep on as my mandatories.
I feel like that was perfect description of the posing differences, and I loved how you said that it's about classic physique, not classic posing. Like obviously, if you're a classic, like by default, your posing will look more classic, but it's because of the physique. I think the 5 mandatories for the NPC classic physique are like the standard right now. Like obviously, when you have the Olympians, the top highest level, this is the standard, and you can actually use the different versions or like a transition. Like let's say you do perform a side chest and maybe like do this classic WMBF side chest as a transition, or use it in a posing routine. But it's still you can still like hit the normal pose, and like even when it comes to bodybuilding compared to classic, like you can clearly see the let's say classic side chest and bodybuilding, because bodybuilding like sit down more on on their legs, rotate differently. Like it's still technically the same pose by criteria, but it looks different. So I don't know what's the point of doing like changing the actual like hand positions, etc. When like let's say when you compared Phil Heath side chest to Chris Bumstead. Like Chris Bumstead, like upper chest is like more like pronounced. Yeah, he's not sitting so on his legs. He's not rotated as much, so you can clearly define the changes in the positioning.
Mm-hmm. I also like with the back double bicep specifically. The WMBF say you have to open one hand. I just don't understand how going from this to that suddenly makes you classic. Like I don't understand it. It just I can't process it. So, but like I said, you just have to respect the federation. That's the way they want to run things. But I definitely think like in terms of the poses that I would maybe do if I was, let's say I ran a federation, and I was the promoter and a judge. I think the way the NPC do it is quite good. You've got your front double bicep, you've got your side chest, back double, abs and thigh with a vacuum, and then you've got your favorite classic pose as well. I think that ticks off everything. I don't think you need a side tricep. I don't think you need a rear lat spread as well. I kind of say to people like those 5 are like the core like powerful poses. There's if you've got a really good back double bicep, it'll probably hide the fact if you've got a really bad rear lat spread. So you almost don't really need a rear lat spread. It's not really showing a huge amount more compared to a rear double bicep. And then you can almost show a little bit more individuality and, expression through that favorite classic pose, which we'll probably touch on a little bit later on when we look at the posing side of things. But, your favorite classic pose, it should be a pose that makes your physique look the best. It should be your best classic pose, not your favorite classic pose. So for me, the fact that I don't hit a front lat spread within my mandatory poses is good, because then I can use my front lat spread, which is probably my best pose. I can use that as my favorite or best classic pose. And then I've also got like a teacup pose I can use, and you can use like single arm overhead bicep stuff, twisting rear doubles as well. So you do have a lot of options for that favorite classic pose, which I quite like. But it can always be quite difficult for, especially like first timers and new bodybuilders, to figure out what their best classic pose is.
I think they had the side tricep back in 2016, and then PC got rid of it because it's like not necessary, like you said. Like even the front lat spread, it's not necessary, because if you do a front relaxed, then front double, like why would you need a front lat spread? You can put it on the front favorite classic. And before we get on to like to specifics about posing, how do you help clients decide what classic pose looks best for them, and how do you actually tell them that it's not their favorite classic pose, is the one they look the best at?
It can be difficult sometimes, but like a lot of clients will maybe just see people hitting a teacup all the time. I feel like a teacup pose is just like the standard for your favorite classic pose now. But if you've got wide, or if you don't have a wide clavicle and a small waist, first of all, maybe you shouldn't be doing classic, because that's obviously the one of the sort of standouts for a classic physique. But if you maybe don't have that, you'll have to change your posing so much, like rotate the hips away, try and bring everything back. So it might not be the best pose for you. So it's trying to almost say to people, okay, we're going to base your favorite classic pose on your genetic structure, base it on your actual physique, what looks best for you. So what I'll sometimes do, and I really like doing this, is let's say I get a client to hit maybe 3 or 4 classic poses. I'll essentially take a screenshot of them and put them all in a line so it looks like they're all on stage, and I'll view it as if I'm a judge, and I'll go, okay, which guy will actually win this? If maybe they're hitting like a mantis pose, well, they might not be showing enough width. Yes, they might have good arms, but they're not showing enough sort of V-taper and X-frame. Compare that to a teacup beside it, that might look a lot better. So I quite like doing that. Even for myself, I'll put my classic poses beside one another and see which one kind of looks best. If I was a judge viewing this, which physique would I sort of place highest?
Do you feel like in a teacup pose you need to have big arms, or does it just flow better, like no matter if the arms are like your best body part or not?
I wouldn't say you need big arms, but I think if you're very torso dominant, you've got like a wide rib cage, big chest, big lats, it might look a little bit out of proportion. So it's all about kind of finding the most balance within that pose. But like the teacup, it's one of those poses. It's very idiot proof. It's pretty simple to hit once you know what you have to be showing. A lot of people you can just open up, pretend it's like a lat spread on one side and it's a bicep on the other side. So yeah, I wouldn't say you need big arms. If you have big arms, definitely helps. I think in any pose, any classic pose, having a big set of arms is always going to favor you. But if you maybe compare that to like a single arm overhead bicep shot, where it's like an ab and thigh and then a single bicep, a lot of guys will use that pose when they don't have a small waist, and it's not right. They're not showing enough of that V taper and X frame. So that's when, if I see a client who has maybe a wider waist, I'll always say to them, okay, maybe it's better if we do a teacup, because you can hide that waist a little bit more and hide the sort of width of your hips.
Is there an advantage to performing like a classic pose if like face front compared to the like twisted back double or like side poses?
I think always starting off with a front pose. Sometimes you judge it, or the federation will say you can only do one classic pose. Sometimes they let you do 2. If you have the option of doing 2, I would always go front on first, and then you can maybe go to the side. I would never do like a rear classic pose. I think the face plays such an important role. Like if you're looking at the judges and it doesn't need to be a full smile, but even just like a little grin or a smirk, I think that can also play such a role, like a subconscious role in terms of the visual appearance of the pose. Because classic, like the people often say classic, it's like there's almost something unwritten about a classic physique. You look at Chris Bumstead and you just know he's classic. And whether it's like the face, the physique, everything just flows really nicely. So if you're hitting a classic pose and you're always looking away and not looking at the judges, I think that can also maybe harm you a little bit. So I prefer to always do like a front-facing classic pose, and then maybe go into like a twisting back double bicep, because I think that twisting back double bicep, if you hit it right and you hit it properly, it just has such like a wow factor to it. It's a pose that people butcher all the time. So if you can hit it right, judges they'll be impressed by that.
Yeah, like for me personally, the twisted back double is hard to hit, but the kneeling version is like much easier. I don't know, like if I'm just too like stiff at the hips, but it's like 10 times easier to do it at the kneeling level.
Mm-hmm. I think like with all classic poses, the key is always in the hips. Like with a twist and back double, if we can tuck our glutes and tuck our hips underneath and push our hips forward, then from the side you'll be able to see your hips are right underneath your rib cage, and it just gives a really nice balanced look to the pose. What you'll often see within that twist and rear double is the guys don't push their hips forward, so it looks like they're all leaning forwards, and it just doesn't look right. So tucking the glutes will also make that rotation a little bit easier for you as well. So, if you think to the kneeling version, you're essentially removing that lower body, and all you have to do is push the hips forward, and then it makes that rotation easier. So that's understandable. I know what you mean by that.
I also feel like when it comes to like my physique, my legs are obviously not the weak part. So when I'm doing the kneeling version, they are obviously like shorter I'm shortening them so it doesn't look like out of proportions so much.
Yeah, I also have like, as I've said, my back is actually my weakness within my physique. But within a twisting rear double, I can actually make my back look quite big and quite dense, because I often think about flexing like into my oblique, because that'll shorten the back. So I've got very high lat insertions, which looks incredible in like a front pose and like a front lat spread. But if I don't flex into my oblique and make my back look almost shorter, there's almost like between the lower lats and the hips,
Yeah.
there's almost like a bit of dead space. There's nothing really happening. There's nothing going on. So if I can make that shorten, then it makes my back look bigger and thicker. So even though when you base it on paper and you look at my physique, in theory, I shouldn't really be able to hit a good twist and rear double. But then there's little posing tweaks that I can make to therefore make it a pretty good pose for me as well.
Is it important to actually look at the judges, like you mentioned it a few times, or does it not matter as much? If, let's say you are looking at the crowd all the time, or just looking straight in the eyes of the judge?
In terms of actually being on stage, I would always look at the judges and look at all of them. You should always be aimed towards the head judge, but look at all. Let's say there's 5 or 6 judges. Look at all of them. Okay, don't just look out in the crowd. You'll often see, like, especially first timers, they'll just be like standing on stage and they look absolutely terrified, and they're just looking into like the crowd and up at the roof. Look at the judges. Look like you actually want to be on stage. I think that's one of the worst things, when people get on stage and they just look like they don't want to be there because they're so scared. If you are scared and nervous about being on stage, then just pretend to be happy. That's what I say. I think looking at the judges and making eye contact with them is such an important aspect of actually competing and being on stage. So I would always sort of aim my posing towards that head judge, but look at all, however many judges there are, make eye contact with them, smile, it comes across a lot nicer.
What would you say to a client that actually does that, looks at the judges, but he notices that none of the judges actually look at him and he feels worse and gets demotivated?
That is a tough one. It is a tough one, but I think a lot of people, you can be on stage and look at the judges and think, why are they not looking at me? But you need to remember that you're just looking at one judge at a time. The other judge on the far side of the table could be looking at you. Likewise, the other side of the table could be looking at you. And then when you move to like the back poses, they could be looking at you then. So I just try and tell people, look at the head judge, look at all the judges, just look like you want to be on stage, pose well, and just let your physique do the talking. And if you're good enough, the judges will look at you, and just kind of have a bit of faith and a bit of confidence that, the work that you've put in and the presentation is going to be good enough on that day.
Yeah, I feel like it's very helpful for people to see, because they might get discouraged, seeing like, oh my God, he's not looking at me. Like, it's all like, and they be complaining like, I should have won, but the judges just they didn't have a good look at me. But yeah, like you said, like the one judge that you are currently observing is not looking, but maybe the other one is. And if you are turning to the back, like, you can know for sure if maybe all of them are looking at you because your back is huge. So that could be it.
Potentially. And I think also, if you're maybe on the outside, let's say it's a very big lineup as well, there's often lineups that can be like 15, 16 guys, and they'll try their best to split it into call outs, but with some federations maybe they don't. Maybe they just bring all 15 guys on stage and make you pose. It can be easy to get overlooked in that scenario. So I just tell people, just pose as best as you can, and try your best. If the judges don't look at you, shit happens. Sometimes that's just the way bodybuilding goes. Just do everything in your power to make sure that you try not to let that happen. Everything within your control, you control, and just hope for the best, essentially.
How impactful is the first impression on stage? Like, let's say you first walk in on the stage before any poses. Is there something you put attention to in maybe a specific like walking style? How to make the best first impression before you even hit the first pose?
So in terms of how you walk out on stage, like, I wouldn't run. Don't like jog out on stage. Walk even steps. Try and look at the crowd, look at the judges, even wave to the crowd, things like that. Just look like you want to actually be on stage. But walk out nice and slow, even paces. And then I've started doing, I haven't actually done this yet, but I know I want to do it when I go out on stage. When you walk out, you'll obviously have your front relaxed as the first pose. I think I might actually come out and just hit a big front lat spread, just to almost immediately get the judges kind of looking at me straight away, and then I can relax and go into my first front relax pose. But I think like when you think of first impressions, like they matter a huge amount. As soon as you walk out on stage, the judges are already scoring you against other people, whether they have actually announced that, the judging is now commenced. They might not have said that, but they are judging you. As soon as you come out in front of them, you're being judged. So first impressions matter a huge amount. Those first four poses that you do are extremely important, those quarter turns. So I always say, if there's a pose that I would maybe place a little bit more importance on, or I would practice a little bit more, it would always be that front relaxed, because it is the first pose the judge is going to see. If you've got a very big, imposing, commanding front relaxed, that's immediately going to bump you from like here up to there. And if you can hold that pose as well, because you need to remember, like, let's say it is a big lineup, it's like a lineup of 15 guys, potentially they might start introducing everyone, say this is not competitor number whatever, number whoever, this is your classic physique short lineup. You're still going to be holding that front relaxed, and you want to be able to hold it. So I'll sometimes maybe get clients to like set a timer for like 3 minutes, and then I just want them to hold the front relax for that entire 3 minutes, and just try and reset the pose as little as possible. So the first time they do it, they might reset the pose 15, 20 times. The next time they do it, I want them to reset it a little bit less and a little bit less. And if you can get to the point where you're holding a front relax for the space of 3 minutes, but only resetting maybe 5 times, then that's going to be good. And I think a lot of people are actually afraid to reset their pose. Let's say you hit a front relax and you feel yourself shaking and starting to fade. There's nothing wrong with just bringing your arms down, getting your breath back, and then coming back up again. A lot of people will just try and hold it for as long as they can, and it doesn't really look right. They start to shake. Immediately you're going to spike your adrenaline and your cortisol, so now you might start to sweat a little bit. That can affect your tan and your presentation. So don't be afraid to reset your pose when you need to. Get your breath back and go again. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would always say, like, first impressions, they're extremely important within bodybuilding. And therefore, the front relax, the first pose you hit, is probably the most important pose.
How far out of the show, like how many weeks should you take your posing practice like really seriously and work on the conditioning as well? Because like you said, sometimes you need to hold the pose like really long.
It's hard to say when to give a specific timeline, because every person is different. I think if you're a serious competitive bodybuilder, I think you should be practicing your posing year round. I don't think you should take time off, but just the intensity of that posing might differ from off season to contest prep. I would say, as soon as you maybe begin the contest prep, I would definitely look at adding in some kind of posing fitness. So doing continuous rounds, maybe, you might start off just doing 2 rounds, 10-second holds. Then maybe you bump that up to 3 rounds, 10-second holds. Then maybe bump that up to 15 seconds. I always say, like, if you can place a little bit more emphasis on your posing at the beginning of prep when you actually feel good, don't leave it till 8 weeks out when you feel like shit, your legs are tired, your muscles are flat, so then when you hit a pose, you can't contract the muscle as well. Don't leave it until then to work on your posing fitness and your posing in general. Put more emphasis on it at the beginning of prep when you feel good. And then by the time the prep actually starts becoming a little bit more difficult, your posing's already at the level you need it to be. And then it's just about maintaining it for the rest of prep. So I would definitely say, like, practice year round if you can. If you really do want to be a good bodybuilder, practice posing both off season, contest prep, and try and ramp that up when you actually feel good.
Yeah, this is something people need to take a note on. Like you said, start like actually posing at the start of the prep when you have the energy, because even like the complexity of the posing, when you treat it as a like learning of the motion, like even the motor learning, it's when you are recovering well, you can learn it better. Like it's still even when the sleep is better, you can actually like analyze it in your sleep and actually learn the complexity of each motion. And exactly. When you are tired at the end of the prep, like this should be automatic almost, like. And exactly. If you leave it to the end, like you don't have any energy, you can't even learn because you are so fatigued that you can't. Your brain is like, come on, man, we are like 4 weeks out. There's no like extra space, extra storage in your brain to actually learn new movement. But let's say someone is posing all right, like he's not perfect, he's not good, he's just average, and how would you ramp up the intensity and the timing of holding poses? Is there like a specific schedule? Like let's say you need to be able to hold like front relax for like 3 minutes, but all the other poses are shorter. How do you approach it?
So, like I said, I would probably put a little bit more emphasis on holding the front relaxed. You're not going to hold a side chest for a minute, but you might hold a front relaxed for a little bit longer. So I'd always make sure that guys are able to hold that front relaxed for as long as they can. If your posing's at a good level, I would maybe just start adding in rounds straight away, posing fitness straight away, and then making tweaks. But you never, if your posing isn't in a good spot and you have so many adjustments and tweaks to make, there's no point in actually adding posing rounds in, because you're just going to reinforce those bad habits. Like we said, posing is a skill. If you're doing the wrong thing, there's no point practicing and getting that motor neuron pattern and stuff, and practicing the wrong thing and making it a habit, because then it's going to be more difficult to correct it later on. So I always say to people, we'll get your posing in a good position, so make the tweaks needed, and then we'll start to ramp things up. I also like to always, I suppose, overdo it on the posing side of things. So I'll always make sure that guys can do like 5 rounds, up to 5 rounds back to back, or maybe 4 rounds back to back. Because if you've prepared for doing maybe just 2 rounds and the judges throw in a 3rd round, you're going to be panicking. Or let's say, for example, you've prepared for 5 rounds and the judges make you do 3. Well, there's going to be less of a drop off from that 1st round to the 3rd round. Yes, the 5th round might be really, really difficult and you might be shaking a little bit, but there's going to be less of an impact going from 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, compared to if you've only practiced for 3. Because people always do say, posing doesn't win you shows, the physique that wins you shows. But I definitely think posing can, if 2 physiques are equal, posing will always overtake. So if you've got 2 guys that are really, really similar, or maybe one guy's slightly ahead of you, and you've done 2 rounds, that guy has only practiced 2 rounds, and then the judges are like, we're going to go again. Well, suddenly he's going to be very fatigued. He might not be contracting his quads, so the quads don't look as good. He might not be able to open his lats as well. He might be starting to sweat. That's when you can actually overtake him, and you can definitely, beat better physiques through posing. And it is simply just about practice and making sure that you can go round after round comfortably. Because like I said, if there's a guy who's better than you, but he's not contracting what he needs to contract, and he's not displaying his physique to the best of his ability, then you can beat him very easily.
Yeah, I feel like when the score is close, the posing endurance is something that can like tip the scale in your favor. And when it comes to like the actual display of the physique, like the physique you display on stage is both the physique you actually have, like let's say your body, plus like, or let's say multiplied by your posing ability. So sometimes person with better physique, like better body technically, can display it in a worse way. So he looks worse despite having better physique. And it was also a good point you mentioned that when you are not posing so well, maybe actually posing a lot can be a disadvantage because you're repeating the wrong positioning. And sometimes it's maybe, do you feel like it will be better for people to pose less if they don't actually know what they are doing and focus more on the quality before they ramp up?
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that. Always focus on the quality of the poses before sort of adding that quantity aspect of going round after round. Because first of all, like if you're not showing the right thing when you're posing, it's irrelevant if you can pose for 30 minutes straight, because you're not showing what you need to show. You're not showing your physique to the best of your ability. So always make sure that your posing is in the poses themselves are at a very good level and you're showing what you need to, and then you can bump up from there. Because like, as you've said, like posing is a skill. It takes time to practice. It takes time to learn, but there's no point practicing the wrong thing because it's just going to harm you on show day. So yeah, like always make sure that you are getting the poses to the right level, and then from there you can bump that up in terms of the quantity of it.
What will be the 3 main posing mistakes, like in general? We will get into specific poses in a second, but like the first three things that are most popular in people.
I suppose, well, we kind of touched on it, the posing fitness side of things, not practicing the being able to hold your poses on stage. It's all good being able to, pose first thing in the morning and take a snapshot when you look perfect on your video and send it to your coach, and he's like, perfect, we look great. But if you've maybe held a pose for 5 seconds and you only look good for 0.5 seconds, that's irrelevant, because if the judge is looking at all the people on stage, they might just look at you when you're not in the pose properly or not hitting it well. So if you can only hold or hit a pose properly for a split second, there's no guarantee the judge is actually going to look at you during that split second. So you need to make sure that you can actually hold a pose well for some kind of duration, whether it be 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I don't think any federation would hold you within a pose for maybe 10 seconds. Like, it's different when you maybe get to the pro ranks. So with like the WMBF Worlds, they'll be doing lots of rounds, but they'll also be holding guys in those like relaxed poses and certain poses for 10, 15 seconds. So when you get to that pro level, it is definitely worthwhile making sure that you can maybe hold a side chest pose for 15 seconds. But definitely at an amateur level, like if you can hold a pose well for 5 to 10 seconds, I think you'll be good. So I would say like the posing fitness side of things. Another thing actually that kind of goes alongside that is actually not understanding or not having an awareness of the federation that you're doing. So within the UK, like we've got the WMBF, we've got the UKDFBA, we've got PCA as well. PCA, they absolutely fly through their poses. Like you could maybe hold a pose for 3 to 5 seconds, and the time to get into the pose and out of the pose is very short. So if I've maybe worked with a guy on doing like really nice transitions in between poses, I might say to him, you know what, let's just speed it up a little bit, because if you're taking 5 seconds to get into a pose, you can maybe just open up and then immediately they've gone to the next pose. So understanding the federation that you're going to do, so like PCA, they're very quick with their posing rounds. You might only do like 1 or 2 rounds. It's a lot less because they often have bigger shows. When you compare that to then the WMBF and the UKDFBA, they will do a lot of rounds. They will work you extremely hard. I know the UKDFBA have actually brought back like 2-man call outs. So if they did that at the NBW show, which I think is great from like a fan perspective. You get to see like 2 guys going head to head. So you could maybe do 3, 4, 5 rounds being compared, and then you're like, oh, I'm done. And then they're like, okay, we want him and him come back out. And they're comparing the top 2. It actually happened to one of my posing clients, Brandon. And luckily, me and Brandon had worked extremely hard on his posing fitness, because we had set very high goals for him. We wanted to potentially get his pro card, but we knew that his physique was very, very good. So we wanted to make sure that he could last multiple rounds. So when they brought him out for the 2-man call out, I was like, we're okay, we're good. He'll be able to pose well. So understanding the federation, both in terms of how quick they go through poses, but also like we touched on earlier in terms of the actual poses that you need to hit on stage. You don't want to get on stage and the judges call a classic side chest and you don't know what that is, and you're looking around being like, what is this pose? Make sure you know the criteria and the poses that you actually need to hit on stage. And then from an actual posing perspective, I think the whole hip positioning, torso positioning, I think is a big issue, where guys don't realize that they're actually going to be posing down to the judges a little bit, because the judges are obviously, you're on the stage, the judges are down below you. So you need to play into that sort of down angle. The hips need to come back a little bit. You need to bring your torso forward. Not only is that going to actually help you in terms of an illusion with making the waist look smaller, with making the upper body look bigger, but you are just going to be pointing down towards the judges a little bit more. I think a lot of guys, when they practice posing, they just pose in front of the mirror. They look at themselves directly straight on and they pose up here, but then when the judges look up at them on stage, it looks like they're actually like this. So that's obviously another big issue. And then also when they practice their posing, they maybe only look at yourself on like an iPhone on the camera, or they look at the mirror. So then when they get on stage, they don't know how poses are really supposed to feel. They don't have enough internal cues as to be able to hit the pose, because they're so based on they've practiced their posing based on what they look like as a reflection, and they don't know how a pose is actually supposed to feel. So when they come to hit it on stage, you might get a side chest where they just keep rotating round and round because they can't remember like how far they actually need to rotate because they've been so based and focused on how they look as a reflection. So I think those internal cues are vital for both first timers, elite athletes as well. You know, ways that we can engage the quads without having to look down and see if your quads are on and see if your quads are contracted. You know, how can we get internal cues to improve that? How can we get internal cues to know that you've rotated enough on a side relaxed pose or a side chest, side tricep pose? The same thing in terms of engaging the glutes and the hamstrings from the back poses. You know, you don't want to hit a back double bicep and then maybe put your hand down and okay, the hamstring is contracted and then lift your arms back up. You know, you don't want to be doing that on stage. So making sure that you've got those internal cues to help you rather than focusing so much on the external.
I think the third point is most overlooked, and it's for me it was beneficial to see your like tips when you perform let's say a front double, back double, but you can see the pose from the side. Like this is really helpful and helps you understand like all right, the judges are looking like at the lower level, so I need to like adjust to it, and especially the part when you adjust your posing based on the feedback from the let's say iPhone photo or a mirror. It's hard. I used to do. I used to pose with closed eyes and then open them to see if I'm in the right pose.
I used to do that as well. I used to close my eyes, hit the pose, look at the mirror, and go, okay, I hit that right. Or yeah. But those things, they're the things that work. You know, they make a difference. Essentially, when you're posing on stage, you should be able to like wrap a blindfold around your eyes and be able to hit the poses perfect each time because you know where the judges are. You've practiced so much. You know where the hips need to be positioned, where the torso needs to be positioned. And if you think like within all those front poses, our torso and hip angle is pretty much identical. So you're going to get a lot of practice at it. So anytime you come to the front, you know, okay, hips need to go back, torso needs to come forward. I need to play on that illusion. You shouldn't think, okay, I'm going to hit my front double bicep. Okay, I need to rotate my hips back. I need to push my chest forward. You should already have that ingrained in your head. Anytime you turn to the front, this is what happens. So I think playing on that quite a bit and playing on that illusion, like posing is an illusion at the end of the day. You know, we can hide weaknesses and we can bring through strengths as you know, to a considerable degree. So, you know, if you've got like a wider waist, you know, we can play about with things. We can rotate the hips away, play on that illusion as much as we can. So yeah, that kind of like practice aspect and just playing about with things, you know, practicing, and don't be afraid to look stupid in a pose if you're practicing. Try something. If it doesn't look right, it doesn't look right. Just go back to the way you were doing it before. Just make sure that when you get on stage, you've practiced it so many times that you can't get it wrong.
Yeah, I feel like if we cut off the visual cues by blindfolding people, we might get some people falling off the stage because of the balance loss.
I think that would be interesting if we brought people out, even just as a bit of fun, and blindfold them and just see what their posing looks like. Then you'll be able to tell who's practiced and used the internal cues versus who's just been looking at themselves. I think that would actually be quite entertaining.
Yeah, and entertaining, that's the best word to describe it. I think it will be unfair sometimes because like obviously the internal feel is important, but just the aspect of like staying in balance with the like motor cortex and everything, like it actually relies on visual information and hearing information as well. So when you like get blindfolded, you don't have those visual cues. It's just hard to stay in balance. Like let's say like one leg stand with eyes closed, eyes open. That might be an issue. Like not even the posing itself. So that could be hard.
If you tried to make me do a twisting 3/4 bicep pose with the blindfold on, I don't think I'd be able to do it. But I might give it a practice and see if I can. But yeah, something like a side chest, for example, when you're maybe putting a bit more weight on your back leg, like even not being able to see the judge or see the audience and focus on a point, I imagine you would be like kind of all over the place.
I think the worst thing that can happen in mandatory poses is like when the judges say like you turn to the side, turn to the right, and you can see like you can look in the eyes of the person next to you. So one of you does the wrong side is quarter turn.
It happens at every single show. It happens all the time. They'll say quarter turn to your right, and somebody goes to the left. But like if that, you know what, things happen. You know, sometimes you're just not thinking. If that happens, just laugh and turn around and go the right way. You know, it's not the end of the world. But I often find like when you've practiced posing so much, your body just knows where it needs to go next. Yeah. If you've hit a front relaxed, you know you need to go to a side relaxed. If you've done a side relaxed, you know you need to go to the back. But then often judges will say, okay, we want competitor so-and-so to swap. And even just hearing the judge's voice, you think you don't listen to what they're saying. You just hear the voice and you think, okay, I need to go to the next pose. So then you might have transitioned to the next one and they're like, no, 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 relax. And it's just even like hearing the voice, you're so focused on. I'm trying to remember like the actual scientific theory, but it's like when you hear something, you just know what to do next. And it's like you immediately go to the next pose. But sometimes you do just need to zone out a little bit, be a little bit more present and say, oh, what are the judges saying? Are they wanting me to move with someone else, or do they actually want me to go to the next pose?
Yeah, I feel like when you like simplify it, you have the association with the sound. Like obviously, when the sound is like specific words, specific like sounds, you know what to do. But when you're like so focused, almost tunnel vision on what you're doing on stage, like any sound will do like anything. They will say like fire, and you are hitting your back double because you just heard the sound.
It's like when you play sport and you hear a whistle, you automatically know whether to stop or go, stop or start.
Yeah.
You know, it's like as soon as you hear that noise, it's just okay. I'll do the next thing. But you know what? If somebody shouted out fire, I imagine people might go from a front relaxed into a side relaxed pose.
Yeah, there's then there will be smoke, and they are turning to the other side.
Yeah, they're still posing. They're still posing.
So then the posing endurance will actually be the one that with most endurance will benefit the most, because when there's smoke everywhere, like some people cannot breathe, the ones with the most endurance will
They'll be
actually.
able to keep going. They'll keep going. Yeah, exactly.
I want to get a run through the mandatory poses. Obviously, you cannot give like specific advice because we don't have a person here. But just in general, I want to run through all the poses. What will be the main issues you see with the front relax? As you said, I agree it's the most important pose. What are the main mistakes you see with this?
Front relaxed. People rarely go wrong with the lower body. Like often people can engage the quads well. They can set their stance pretty well. It's more so the upper body. You'll often get guys who maybe just can't open up their lats, and you know they can't protract their scapula well. They don't have that control over their shoulder blades to be able to retract and protract. If you can't do that, you won't be able to pose. You need to have good scapular control. So I think actually opening up the lats. Also within that front relaxed, I think the arm positioning and shoulder positioning, you know, maybe you'll get guys who like lift their elbows up really high, looks like they're riding a motorbike.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell like people who've maybe just who've seen someone hit a front relaxed and they see the arms wide, so they just lift them out. Really, we actually want to initiate everything by lifting the lats out, and that just lets the arms relax down. So, you know, initiating the pose with the lats and driving them out, and then just relaxing the arms down on top. Because if the arms are contracted and the delt starts to contract, you'll lose that cap. You know, if you were looking at yourself doing a dumbbell side raise, if you lift your arm out, that's going to be completely flat. But if you try and relax the arm and just let it sit on top of the lat, then you can get that delt cap coming through. So it's really just about, you know, maximizing the shape and the silhouette. I think the silhouette is such an important thing when it comes to posing. You know, trying to get like nice capped shoulders, you know, wide lats, small waist. And then once you've got that, then you can focus on the details a little bit more, you know, trying to bring it out a little bit more quad detail, etc. But I would say like opening up the lats, arm positioning, torso positioning, like we talked about, with those front poses, those are probably the main mistakes with that front relaxed.
Do you want to elongate the torso in that pose?
I personally prefer doing it, yeah, for a couple of reasons. I think if you can elongate your torso, you can get more air in. So I think the breathing aspect is so underrated when it comes to posing. And I don't just mean by remembering to breathe, which is also very important, but I think how we can use our breathing to actually improve our poses. So if you're trying to, you know, let's say you're hitting a front relax or a front lat spread, anything where you're trying to open up as big as you can and take up as much space, you know, take as much air into your rib cage, into your lungs as you can. Let that rib cage expand out. If there's videos of me hitting a front lat spread and I've got the audio on, you'll be able to hear me take a massive breath in through the nose when I hit like a front lat spread, because it has like such a balloon effect, you know, where if you get more air in, it'll just lift your chest up prouder, it'll expand all this, it'll make your chest look bigger, your delts look bigger. So I think actually being able to utilize your breathing within poses to benefit you, whether you're trying to flare the lats and open up as big as you can, or maybe it's like a side relax pose where you're trying to show more midsection detail. You know, maybe we want to flare the lats when we're rotating into the pose, so we maybe take a big breath in, but then we want to get rid of all that air and keep our midsection looking as small as possible. But I think with that front relaxed, I would personally prefer to elongate the torso. I think you just get more out of it. If you exhale and crunch the abs, immediately your chest is going to drop and you won't look as big here. So you could have somebody who is half the size of you, but because they've expanded the ribcage and opened up, they look twice as big because they're obviously playing on that breathing technique versus you where you're trying to show a bit more detail. And like if you flick back to the old guys, back in even the 80s, the 90s, they always flex down. And I think it is such a cool pose. But when you're being judged on stage, it just might not translate as well if everyone else is expanding the ribcage and elongating that torso.
Yeah, I feel like it only looks good in a physique like Nick Walker or Hadi when the abs are so thick and their waist isn't too small. Like it looks good because they're actually the thick waist is advantage because of the abs development. But
Exactly,
any other physique, the elongate, I also am a fan of it. Do you emphasize the chest breathing instead of the diaphragmatic, just not to put the pressure in the stomach?
So I will always advise guys to breathe in through the nose, because if you breathe in through your nose, you can pull your belly button in. If you breathe in through your mouth, then your stomach can pull out as well. So always try and breathe in through the nose. You can, like, even within a front relaxed, you can still breathe. If you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, you can still control your midsection. You can still pull that belly button in nice and tight. So, don't just be like mouth breathing on stage and like this, it's not going to translate well. So try and get like a nice controlled rhythm to your breathing. Focus on inhale through the nose, out through the mouth. Keep that belly button pulled in nice and tight.
What about the foot stance? Should the heel be like hip width and the feet out rotated outwards, or do you prefer the wider stance?
It's very person dependent, because if you're looking at within any front pose, I suppose, you don't want an adductor gap. So we always want to base our stance on that. Yes, there's things we can do with the hip positioning to maybe, if you engage your glutes, you might be able to pull your adductors through a little bit more, even on like a front pose. But I would always say it is person dependent. If you've got really big adductors, then you want to maybe have your stance a little bit wider so that, the adductors aren't overlapping. But then you also need to think, okay, the wider your feet go, the more it might actually throw off that X frame. If your feet are really wide, it can be more difficult to pop those knees out and keep the quad sweeps looking nice and full. And even with that, I think with like classic physique, what I'll often do is if I've got a guy hitting let's say a front double bicep, to make sure that we do actually have a really good balanced X frame, I'll often draw a line straight down from both of his lats directly to the ground. And you should see that those quad sweeps line up pretty evenly and match to that line very, very well. And if you do that, you'll have a balanced X frame. If you don't do that and your feet are too narrow, you'll look like a capital Y, where it's like really wide up top and then it goes down to nothing. So you're always looking to maximize that X frame when you can. So yes, it is very individual dependent. I think for a lot of guys, I would just say start hip width apart, toes out a little bit. Some people are different. Some people need to rotate the feet out quite a bit. Some people can keep them fairly straightforward. It's just whatever stance allows you to engage those quads as best as you can, but also show the quad sweep, minimize the adductor gap. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It is very person dependent, but that would be a rough guide. And keeping those knees popped out, rotated out, to show the quad sweep.
Yeah, I think Regan Grimes is a good example of the wider stance, and obviously he has adductors to show for it. So now we are turning to the right. Let's mix the right quadrant and the left quadrant at once. Like how do you start with the legs positioning and then the torso rotation, etc.?
So lower body wise, it is very straightforward. Like the feet need to be together in contact, but whatever foot is closest to the judges, we can maybe shift a little bit further forward, so then you can see a little bit more through that side leg. I would often lock out the legs nice and straight as well, because you can get the quad just like hanging over the kneecap. If you contract a muscle, it's obviously going to shorten. So you need to be quite selective with what muscle groups you actually contract. So I would keep the quads relaxed, I would keep the hamstrings relaxed, and all you need to focus on is that glute. So you can tuck the glutes underneath, try and rotate the pelvis under, but just make sure you don't excessively like push your hips forward, because if you do that, it's going to like look like you're kind of leaning backwards a little bit. And it's just going to look bizarre. And you need to remember, this is a symmetry pose. How do we look symmetrical? Well, we need to have that sort of center point, that center line. I'll often say with like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, it doesn't look symmetrical because it's going off at an angle. But if you were to simply just pull that vertical, it would be symmetrical. So we want to almost imagine that pole running directly through the heel, through the hip, out the top of the head, which is something that I actually got from, it was John Lofthouse and Sammy Williams, who are like, they run the Posing University, which is a fantastic resource. I would always recommend clients to go there, jump on that school site, and they've taught me a huge amount about posing. So I can't take credit for that one. Okay, that is their idea. I didn't steal it off them because I'm giving them credit, but that's where I got that information from. But we want to try and keep those joints sort of aligned as best as we can. And then through the upper body, like one of the biggest mistakes is people just contracting too hard. They just flex everything that they can and they just make themselves look smaller. So I would actually just relax a little bit more. Just flare your lats out nice and wide. Keep your arms fixed in position. And then just simply focus on the torso rotation and rotate round until you're like showing your collarbone towards the judges. Once you've done that, then you just exhale and kind of flex into the pose. So it's actually very simple to get into, but you know, as I said before, I think the key is probably in the hips. If your hips are rotated back, it's going to make that rotation difficult. It's going to throw off the alignment of the pose. So making sure those glutes are actually tucked underneath is really, really important.
What do you think of the broomstick method for torso rotation? Like, let's say you're holding a stick and then just rotating and letting it go.
I've seen guys use that. I know Chris Barnett, the posing coach, uses that quite a bit. I think it's really good to teach the thoracic rotation. I think it's fantastic for that. But realistically, it doesn't, you know, when you drop the broomstick, for example, your elbow might be out of position, so then you need to readjust it. I'd much rather, you know, you're not going to have a broomstick on stage. So I'd much rather just get guys to learn how to flare the lats, rotate and exhale. I think that's just a much easier way of learning.
Are you a fan of any mobility drills, like let's say thoracic rotation on the like rest days or even every other day, just to get into these ranges?
I am a fan of it. I probably don't do it enough for myself. I've definitely noticed that now that I've kind of ramped up my posing ahead of prep and be like, okay, I'm actually quite sore. I'm quite stiff doing this. I'm not as mobile as I once was. So I think like a lot of thoracic rotation stuff is good. Being able to rotate your torso while keeping your hips facing forwards. You know, that's the key to the side relax pose, even for, you know, like the side chest, side tricep, because you're wanting to keep that side leg side on to the judges. If you've got poor thoracic rotation, more than likely your hip is going to open up and you'll lose that side leg because it's going to pull around towards the judges. So I would say a lot of thoracic rotation stuff, making sure you can keep your hips in position, rotate this way. Even just a lot of sort of scapula drills, like I've said, you know, being able to control your scapula as best as you can. Stuff for the shoulders, external rotation, like if you're hitting a back double bicep but you can't externally rotate and crank your wrist back, the judges aren't going to be able to see your arm because it's going to be pulled away from the judges. So, you know, I'd say the external rotation of the shoulder, thoracic rotation, and then scapular mobility. I'd say those are probably the most important. If I was to pick three, I would probably say those three.
Does the deep tissue work or massage help as well to get that?
Oh yeah, 100%. If you've got a muscle that's tight and knots in your back, it's not going to open up as well. You're not going to be able to flex it as well. So making sure that you're sort of staying on top of your body in terms of a physiotherapy, muscle therapy sort of side, that's also going to improve blood flow. It's going to help your training as well. So there's multiple benefits to it. But I would definitely, once again, something I maybe need to do a little bit more often, but it's something I would definitely recommend for people.
All right, we need to ramp things up to get through all the poses. Let's turn to the rear. What are like the two main points when it comes to lower body and upper body?
So lower body wise, it's always going to be glutes and hamstrings. Okay, like how can we get the biggest glutes, the biggest hamstrings, but also show enough detail? So a lot of that comes down to the internal cues that we've talked about. You know, how can we engage the hamstrings? Well, we can imagine using like friction to our advantage, trying to drag the feet back, engage those hamstrings. But the most important thing to those rear poses, once again, hip positioning. Like if you rotate your hips back excessively, you might get big glutes, big hamstrings, big adductors, but you might not be able to engage and show as much detail. Likewise, if you pull them through underneath, might show a lot of detail, but then you might not be able to show enough size. So I would always have like the hips around neutral. I think that's the best of both worlds, with the rear poses. Once again, making sure that we show enough quad sweep as well. Quad sweep can add so much size to those rear poses. So keeping those knees popped out outside the feet, almost imagine you're trying to push them to the walls beside you. Show enough quad sweep, you'll show a bigger sort of leg from the back. And
What
then I
about
suppose
hip? No.
I was just going to say upper body wise, it's obviously very pose dependent. With the rear double bicep, I think that external rotation of the shoulder, it's probably the biggest issue I see. Not being able to open up the lats as well. Scapula maybe pinched together a little bit. And that also goes for the rear lat spread as well, just not being able to open up as well.
What about hips pushed back compared to like hip extended? Just one can show off the glute striation as well, but the other one can make the legs look much bigger. What are you? Is there a balance between those, or are you in favor of one of those?
I'd say it's a balance. So I often use the hips under as a way to show detail within a transition shot. So I show, okay, look at the judges are looking, look at all that detail that I've got, and then I'll maybe rotate them back just a little bit to bring through a little bit more size, where I can still show detail, maybe not as much detail, but I gain so much more through the size. Posing's always like a toss up. You might sort of gain a little bit somewhere but lose a lot somewhere else. And then you switch it, you might gain so much more and lose a little bit. So it's always like, where do I gain the most but lose the least? I'd say that's probably one of the main things, especially with hip positioning.
How would you adjust the legs positioning to a back double? Like, let's say, to check the dominant leg and turn to like further away, how would you adjust it?
In terms of like what leg you bring back, I think it is just person dependent. If you have a weaker leg, I would maybe bring that one back towards the judges because you can bring through a little bit more balance and symmetry. If you're always showing your dominant leg, it might look a little bit odd. So we can use the back double because you obviously bring 1 foot back. You can use that to hide the weakness and hide the asymmetry between the two legs. What else did you say there? Sorry.
No, I think that was just a single question. How do you adjust it?
Yeah, I base it on sort of just what looks best. I would always start with the weaker leg, but then you might find that your balance might not be as good from one leg to the next. That is often one of the biggest issues as well in a rear double bicep, where people just don't have balance because maybe too much body weight's going to one leg, not enough's going to the other, or they're relying too much on sitting back on the dominant leg and then they're falling backwards. So that's something, your body weight distribution within that rear pose is very, very important.
When it comes to the body weight distribution, what percentage of your body weight would be on the back leg? Like, is it like 40-60, 50-50? How do you rate it?
I do 50-50. Well, at least I tell people 50-50. And if they do 50-50, they might still be leaning to one side. And then I'm like, okay, you need to put a bit more to the other side. So a lot of the time it is person dependent, where their perception of 50-50 might not actually be symmetrical. It might actually be like 70-30. So then I need to tell people, okay, you need to think about putting more weight to your left leg, for example. So it is person dependent, but I would try and keep everything 50-50 between the two legs.
When it comes to elbow, how high or how low should the elbows be at the rear back double biceps?
Yeah, and it's a tongue twister. Back double biceps, I would say, I think it looks quite good when you have the elbows in line with the shoulders and the collarbone. So if you can sit your elbows and it's a nice straight line from one elbow through the shoulder across the collarbone to the other elbow, I think that always looks quite good. Sometimes if you maybe have weaker arms, then you might need to pick it up slightly, because then you can bring the bicep peak up a little bit more and it makes it look a little bit more sort of prominent. If you can draw like a line from your bicep peak and it can sit above your delt, then that means when you look at a back double, when you look at the arms, you're looking at the biceps a little bit more rather than the delts, which is something I have difficulty with because my delts are quite overpowering. So sometimes if I drop my elbows too low, I just look like delt. I just look like shoulders. So then I have to pick my elbows up a little bit.
How would it look in a front double, let's say? Is it the same positioning when it comes to elbows?
It's fairly similar. I think in a front double bicep, you could maybe get away with bringing your hands a little bit closer towards your head and lifting the elbows up. I think that can look, especially for classic physique, I think that can look quite nice when you've maybe sort of got like an asymmetrical stance and then you're bringing the hands a little bit more like this, kind of like how, like Flex Wheeler did it back in the day, where he was kind of hitting it here, closing off the gaps a little bit more. But once again, it's just how it looks on your physique. That's what you need to base it on.
You mentioned the asymmetrical stance. How would you compare the, like, let's say the front leg stance when in back double? Like, are you in favor of twisting it or just playing straight on with the, like, to show the symmetry?
It's for bodybuilding, I think you can maybe get away with just going symmetrical. I think it looks good for the majority of people. With classic, I would always opt for some kind of asymmetrical stance. depending on the physique and how well developed the lower body is, maybe how wide the waist is, then you can adjust it. So if you've got a pretty big waist, maybe don't have the biggest quads, then you'd maybe need to go a little bit more rotated away. But often you just want to let the physique speak for itself. So like you've got classic guys who often do a front double bicep with their feet symmetrical. You've got like Niall Darwin, you've got Yemi. Those guys have such incredible structure. It would just be a shame to try and alter that. Sometimes it's best just to stay symmetrical, open up into the front double, and then everyone's looking at this perfectly symmetrical physique, the lats that just go down into the waist, massive sweeping quads. So they actually don't need to adjust anything because their physique and their genetic structure can actually shine through very nicely in that front double. For classic guys, like I said, I would maybe look at swapping the stance. However, I think the key thing there is just making sure that you're keeping both knees popped out. What you'll often find, especially with maybe guys who have come from men's physique into classic, they often let their foot go really far from the body, the legs really straight. So let's say my left foot is forward, their left foot's too far away from the body, they can't show enough quad sweep, and they often let their knee just like internally rotate and fall inwards. So then you're going to lose a lot of quad sweep. And like I said, the X frame is not just wide upper body, it's also lower body as well. So you need to make sure that you're showing the quad sweeps that match pretty well to the lats.
Yeah, Niall is a perfect example, and like I've been saying it a lot for the past 2 years. This is probably my favorite physique. Like currently competing, it's just so crazy, and
yeah, it's so good. I absolutely love his physique. I wouldn't be surprised if he is Mr. Olympia within the next 3 to 5 years. It's ridiculous.
How about the torso? Are you elongating it as well as from the legs, or is there some tweaks?
I would elongate. You know, you can either pull the belly button in or you can vacuum into the pose. I think when you elongate the torso, you can also, once again, the breathing aspect, you can get a big breath in. You can let the rib cage expand, make this whole top line look bigger. You can get the lats out a lot better. If you were to exhale and drop your rib cage in a front double, you're probably going to lose quite a bit through your lats. You know, if you compare that to an abs and thigh pose where you lift your arms up and drop down, a lot of guys actually look bigger before they get into an abs and thigh because they're up here and they look, you know, they've taken a big breath in, their lats are open really nicely, and then they exhale and crunch and, you know, lose a lot of size. So my personal preference for the front double is always just to inhale, pull the belly button in, elongate the torso, because I think you gain so much more. But, you know, if you have a really good midsection, then why not hit elongated first, and then if you're kind of struggling to hold it, flex down into the abs and show that. So we did that with Petru Roncha, who's Romanian. He won his WMBF pro card, he won his INBA pro card as well. He's got a really good midsection and his waist doesn't sort of shoot out when he flexes his abs. So we got him to lift up into the pose, hit a vacuum, and then crunch down as well. So he was showing like two really good poses, but it was the same pose essentially.
When it comes to abs and thighs, are you a fan of symmetrical legs as like legs symmetrical or like one leg ahead to show more detail, maybe the rectus femoris in a different way?
Yeah, I think similar to what we talked about with the front relaxed, like if you've got a really good shape and genetic structure, why not just go symmetrical? Why change things, okay? However, for most people, I think they could get away with bringing maybe 1 foot forward to kind of show that quad. You can also bring through a little bit more sort of rec fem detail, like you said, up into the hip, which I think looks really, really nice. So I actually prefer kind of going for 1 foot forward. It's also a good way to hide imbalances from left quad to right quad. So I know we've talked about maybe showing the bad or the weaker side towards the judges to make it look bigger. However, on like a lot of the front poses, I'll actually show my stronger quad because I'm not going to show them my shit one. I'm going to show them a good one. So I'll bring my right leg forward on those kind of front poses like an abs and thigh.
Right, 2 points about side chest. What would be the weight distribution, like front leg and the back leg, and how would you how much rotation in the torso, and also like where do you grip the hand? Is it actually at the wrist or maybe the hand? Like how do we approach it?
So body weight distribution, I would always say like 80% on the back leg, 20% on the front leg. I think the most of your body weight should be on that back leg. If you put too much pressure through that front foot, it's going to be more difficult to engage the glute. Also, you risk the hamstring potentially contracting as well because you're kind of digging into the ground. So I would always say about 80%, 20%. In terms of like the upper body, rotation-wise, once again, very person dependent. I think a lot of people maybe just turn a side chest into a front chest where they just keep rotating, and then they lose the arm, because if you like keep rotating around a circle, what is towards the judges is just going to be pulled back and away from them. So always trying to keep the arm as side on as possible, and maybe just thinking more so about creating width through the back arm, so like flaring your fore lat to try and bring through the width rather than just continually rotating around. And then in terms of like the hand position and grip, if you're maybe someone with longer arms, you might need to grab a little bit higher up, because you need to be able to pull that elbow back and also get that lat round. If you've got shorter arms, what we can often do is just interlock like our thumb and our pinky finger and grip like that, because then they will be able to bring the elbow back. If they grab too far up, they'll kind of be stuck in a pose like this. If they can grab the hand, then they can drag the shoulder back and open up a little bit better. So playing towards your actual genetic structure there. Longer limbs, grab higher up. Shorter limbs, you could probably grab a little bit more towards your hand.
Or do the WMBF with the hands like this.
Or do that one. Yeah, or do that one. Why not?
Yeah, I have last two questions before we go. First question is, I have to get through it. I should have asked it at the start. What's the origin story behind the butcher name?
Behind the name. So it's a funny story, but essentially it's a little bit rude, it's a little bit vulgar, but one day I was sitting out in my back garden. This was like 5-6 years ago, and I'd been training a good amount of time at that point, and my mate turned to me and he said, "Your legs are just like a load of meat. You would be a butcher's wet dream." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of funny," and the name kind of just stuck with me. And then one time it was during lockdown and COVID, and I was like, I want to make a fitness account. I want to make a gym account to track my progress and help keep me accountable. And I just called it Butcher's Wet Dream, and the name just stuck. It's so catchy. So everyone just knew me as the butcher. Nobody knows my actual name. People see me. I compete at shows, and they see my name, and they're like, I don't know who this is. And then because they know me as the butcher. So that name stuck. And then obviously when we launched Natural Physique Coaching, Finn was like, you need to get rid of that. Okay, we'll keep you can either be Matt_Natural Physique, or you can be Butcher. And I was like, people know me as the Butcher, so I'll stay with the Butcher.
And the second question about we talk about posing a lot, but I want to touch up one point about the posing business and the seasonality of it. How would you rate it, and what would be your advice to a person who maybe wants to start actually like coaching posing? And is there a space for a posing coach to actually make a living like just teaching posing?
Mm-hmm. So I haven't actually been in this game for a huge amount of time. It was this time last year I actually started posing coaching. So I'm relatively inexperienced in terms of like the duration that I've been doing it. But I was lucky that as soon as I started doing this, Finn, Josh, Noah were like, these are the clients I want to go to you. And they essentially said, go to Matt, go to the Butcher. So I was lucky that I was able to work with a large amount of people straight away and get that experience. And I was still working 2 other jobs at that point. So I was working three part-time jobs when I first started. And over time, I started getting busier. I started getting better as a posing coach. And I was able to just drop off the clients from there, or drop off, the jobs. And then in May, I went full-time as a posing coach. From like May until October, it was mental. Like, it was so crazy. I was getting a lot of business. I was doing better and better with the more people I got. And then in November, it did start to drop off quite a bit. And I was just like, I kept reminding myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to get busy again. I'm going to get more clients. And then it actually got a little bit busier around December, January. I think a lot of people maybe start competing or start prep in January time. So they were just like inquiring then, putting their name out or saying, okay, I want to maybe start posing coaching in the new year. And yeah, this month has been one of my best months ever in terms of posing coaching. So there is definitely an element of seasonality to it. The summer months are obviously going to be a lot busier, but I often tell people, start posing early. So that's probably why I'm getting a little bit busier now, because the show season doesn't really start till April, May, but people are actually taking action. They're starting the posing early. So I'm hoping that like when it comes to June, I'm not really getting too many new clients, because all those people who are competing later on, they've already started. So yeah, that would be like my sort of advice with the seasonality of it. As to someone who wants to get into posing coaching, there's definitely a market for it. I think like posing, you can't replace posing with AI. There's always going to be a need for posing. And I think the one thing that really helped me the most was well, a couple of things, giving away as much as I can for free. I just wanted to help people. And when you have a passion for it and you just want to help people, then you will do well. You know, things will work out. So actually having a passion for it, you know, giving away a lot for free. And I think also just like be willing to work with everyone and build relationships with everyone. You know, I get on so well with my clients. A lot of my clients just call me their therapist, because often on our posing calls they'll come in and they'll chat for 5-10 minutes and then we'll get into some posing. But I often thought like it was really beneficial during prep because I was in contact with their coaches a lot. So if you think like how often would you maybe speak face to face to your online coaching clients? You know, it might not be that often. It would maybe just be voice notes and messages. I was actually able to see what those prep clients were like, you know, whether they were dragging, were they tired? And then I was able to actually feed that back to their coach. And their coach was asking me, how was he on the call? Did he seem okay? Did he seem tired? Like, what was he like? And I was able to feed back to the coach, and that was helping them with their own online coaching and the prep side of things. So that's why this whole natural physique coaching business is really fantastic, because all four of us coaches are in constant communication. So it is almost like if you imagine like a sports team or a club, it's similar to that, where you've got so many different coaches. Yes, there might be a head coach, but there's like, you know, I might be the equivalent of like a strength and conditioning coach or a physiotherapist, or you know, even just a normal sort of sports psychologist. You know, we're all working together to bring the best athlete to the stage.
Perfect. Yeah, I know we have to go, so I want to thank you again for your time. And I would like to have you again in future, because there are still many things I want to discuss, but obviously we run out of time.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for the talk. And I know listeners will really appreciate it, because there are so many helpful tips. Like if I wanted to do like cut clips out of it, I would just cut out like episode is 80 minutes. So just put 80 clips of you speaking about different poses. That would be awesome.
No, thank you very much. I'd be more than happy to come back on. You know, I had a great conversation there. There's lots more. I could chat about posing for days. I could honestly keep going. So yeah, definitely sometime. Just drop me a message. Maybe even like after I've competed as well. Hopefully done pretty well in my shows.
Yeah, hopefully with the pro card in the back.
Fingers crossed. You see that sitting up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah. Thank you, mate.
Perfect. And I look forward to hearing you more on the Natural Physique podcast. So obviously like a plug-in for the other podcast.
Yeah, so Natural Physique Coaching podcast on YouTube and Spotify. I also have another podcast called the Lifestyle Loops. We just sit and chat about life. Okay, it's a lot more relaxed. Yes, we talk about bodybuilding, but it's just a bit of a laugh. So Lifestyle Loops podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can also follow my Instagram, Butcher.
The link will be in the bio for the Instagram.
Perfect. And I've also started YouTube, but that's more of just like vlogs and just showing my life.
Perfect. And if anyone wants to like get in touch with you regarding the posing, they should just DM you on Instagram.
Just message me at Instagram, or I've got a link to a type form in my Instagram bio. You can click that, inquire, or you can just drop me a message.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you again, Matthew Chapman. So this is actually the first time we mentioned your real name on the on the episode.
Say the butcher.
Yeah, the butcher. Thank you again, and see you guys in the next episode.